Okay, it's been a while. So, where did we leave off on the adventures of Grasshopper-themed heroes in their battles against the forces of evil? Ah yes, here. The final phase of the original Kamen Rider gets straight to business. The remnants of Shocker as it has existed until now are mercilessly eliminated to allow a deadlier presence to emerge in its place, and the menace that stalked the heroes towards the end of the previous chapter finally fully reveals himself to present a challenge not easily forgotten. Yet it's only a taste of what the Great Leader and his new organization, trained in the deserts of Africa, has in store for the Champions of Justice. What is this organization? But Taki is kind of wrong here. Led by the eye-twitching General Black, the last in the line of transforming generals that started with Colonel Zol, Gale Shocker quickly establishes itself as a fearsome organization by purging its ranks of undesirables, putting its personnel on a drug that would kill them if not taken every 3 hours, a tactic that prevents any of them from being detained by the enemy as they were in the past, and finally, launching a direct assault on the Tachibana Racing Club. Gale Shocker even targets and nearly succeeds in wiping out the Kamen Rider Kids Corps, and the Gale Shocker Kaijin, all a fusion of at least 2 different creatures, are deadlier than the ones of the past, managing to knock Kamen Rider out of commission on more than a few occasions. Yeah, looks like Gale Shocker might be too much for Takashi Hongo, and that's how the show Just kidding. Like in the last phase, when things get too dire, Hayato Ichimonji drops in to save the day, and his first of 2 appearances sees him aiding a mission that will expose the Great Leader, mastermind behind Shocker in all of its forms. And in a tale told across multiple episodes, the heroes of the Tachibana Racing Club join forces with a secret anti-Shocker group to see this through. Eventually, all of this brings Hayato and Takashi into conflict with the Shocker Riders.
Shocker Rider number 1, Shocker Rider number 2, Shocker Rider number 3, Shocker Rider number 4, Shocker Rider number 5, Shocker Rider number 6.
One missed opportunity was not having this arc, with its many twists and turns, act as one extended march into the finale. It would have been a natural and exciting lead into the confrontation with the Great Leader, and thus the end of the show. Instead, there are 2 throwaway episodes between the Shocker Riders and the climax, which comes at the cost of the riveting momentum the Shocker Rider episodes had built. Still, while slightly delayed, the heroes finally come face to face with the elusive red-hooded villain, and the score is settled once and for all. There's one more thing to note about this phase of the show. Episode 84 is directed by series creator Shitaro Ishinomori himself, and it's really one of the most distinct and memorable episodes of the entire series. Ishinomori also makes a brief cameo as a fisherman who meets a terrible fate. Another thing to note is the conflicted nature and redemption of its villain of the week, a rarity in this show that in this case sees the love between a father and daughter prevail over the It pairs the experimental tendencies and moody atmosphere of the earlier episodes with the lighter sensibilities and polish of the later episodes to unique effect. Comparable, though not quite at the level, to some of what director Akioji Soji had been doing with his episodes of Ultraman and Ultra 7. And I would have loved to have seen more of this type of visual and atmospheric experimentation. Ultraman, the original show alone, is the more impressive affair from a visual perspective, and that's without bringing Jisoji into the picture. An excellent point of comparison involves the episode set at the Hydra statue of Izu Shabutenzu. The point-and-shoot mentality that dominates a lot of the early Kamen Rider is on display here, a sharp contrast to the more interesting compositions derived from how the Ultra team filmed its characters around the statue. Nevertheless, while never really reaching the heights of Ultraman, Kamen Rider keeps on improving, and gets stunning in its own right. Anyway, that was the last phase of the original Kamen Rider series. What do I think? I liked it a lot, but at 98 episodes and 2 short films, it's almost certain to start losing its luster for many viewers. Even with the revolving door of heroes and villains, introduction of new concepts and distinct phases, at the end of the day, a fair chunk of the show remains functionally the same, and things can get overly familiar. The villains brainwash children to use as soldiers at least 3 times. Large groups of kaijin are revived on a few different occasions. There are back-to-back episodes of the heroes stumbling upon Shocker in the woods. You get the point. So here's something to help make the show easier to manage. Episodes 1 through 13 feature Takashi Hongo as the lead character, and is where the show is most consistently at its darkest and most experimental. However, the trade-off is that it's also the show at its cheapest. Episodes 14 through 18 is where Hayato Ichimonji assumes lead duties, and the show is completely revamped. It's lighter, and already has a bit more polish. All the supporting characters minus Tachibana and Taki are either gone or disappear soon after, and replaced with the Tachibana Racing Club. These episodes, more or less, establishes what the show will be for the rest of its run. Episodes 26 and 27 are Colonel Zol's introductory episodes, and due to it being an awesome Christmas episode with a Nazi Christmas party and the demise of the Colonel, episode 39 is another must-watch from this bunch. Episodes 40 and 41 serves as the 2-part return of Takashi Hongo, the start of Double Rider action, and features the introduction of Dr. Death. This is also where you get the first original film, Kamen Rider vs. Shocker. Plot-wise, it's not exactly required viewing, but since Kamen Rider looks good in CinemaScope, and the film has more Double Rider goodness, I encourage watching that too. Episode 52 is the last to feature Hayato as the lead character, and gives him a heartfelt goodbye. Episode 53 is where Takashi officially takes over again, and where we meet the final Shocker General, Ambassador Hell. You can watch another short film at this point, Kamen Rider vs. Ambassador Hell, for more Rider antics and a wider aspect ratio, and some unique set pieces. Episode 54 is simply a fantastic episode with an awesome battle set at a scenic location, worth viewing for that alone. Episode 68 is the last to feature Dr. Death. Episodes 72 and 73 are the return of Hayato Ichimonji, decked out in an upgraded uniform, and it's a heck of a return. Episodes 77 to 79 are the last episodes with Shocker as the primary villainous organization, and the last to feature Ambassador Hell. Episodes 80 and 81 introduce Gale Shocker, General Black, and most of what you can expect from the last chunk of the show. Episode 84 is the Ishinomori directed episode. Episodes 91 to 94 covers the Shocker Riders, and Hayato is along for the ride. Episodes 97 to 98 is a 2-parter that wraps up the series, and after getting this far, you probably will want to see how it all ends. And those are most of the highlights of the entire series. Ideally, you'll watch more than this, if not the whole show. But whether you watch it selectively or decide to take on the whole behemoth, Kamen Rider is at least worth a shot in some form. It's an interesting show in at least a few different ways. For one, it's an exercise in perseverance through adversity. The show's journey from inception to the TV screen took nearly a year, with many roadblocks and redirections along the way, and its troubles weren't over once it made it to TV. Initial viewership ratings were not as great as anticipated, yet many of its most defining elements were the results of the challenges it faced. To compensate for the second writer's actor not having a motorcycle license, and thus the inability to film him on one, which is how Takashi Hongo originally changed forms, the Henshin sequence was born. And the show's poverty-stricken debut forced its filmmakers to be creative in presentation, which meant relying on expensive special effects work wasn't an option, which led to the Rider Kick and various unconventional filmmaking tricks. In the beginning, Kamen Rider only had 4 million yen, or $100,000, to use an episode. That was not only less than half of what Tsuburaya Productions had been spending on its Ultra series, it was less money than what many TV dramas at the time had at their disposal. But the show eventually exploded in popularity, and the results of this gradually became visible on screen. The death scenes of Shocker villains went from unraveling beads, disappearing foam, and shattering mirrors, to isolated explosions, and then to on-site explosions. The fight scenes leave the back roads and quarries for stunning water-based locations, bridges, and theme parks. The action becomes tighter, more dynamic, and filled with increasingly daring stunt work. Much of it good without even a hint of reservation. As far as writing is concerned, Kamen Rider is flawed in some pretty significant ways. Upon any form of close inspection, the storytelling is often only functional at best. There are glimmers of greatness, namely Takashi's loss of humanity and his struggles with that. However, rarely is it explored in any real depth. The women get the short end of the stick,
あれがショッカーのアジト。いいわ。思い切って中を探ってやる。ああ、びっくりした。
ウーマンリブは女性上位の時代かもしれませんがね。こういうことはやっぱり男の仕事。動かないで待っててね。香港にどやされっからね。よっ。じゃあね。
and Shocker comes across as a fairly incompetent organization a lot of the time. So that is at least one reason I'm excited about the upcoming Shin Kamen Rider, and really curious to see how it gets updated by writer and director Hideaki Anno. Anno is best known for Neon Genesis Evangelion, a series adored for its gripping exploration of depression and other trauma, and thus he is a likely candidate to take better advantage of Kamen Rider's storytelling potential. Besides the awesome job he's done with other icons of tokusatsu, the trailer for Shin Kamen Rider already promises an expanded role for the original Kamen Rider girl, Ruriko Midorikawa, and hints at an interest in revisiting the uneasiness, angst, and loneliness of those early episodes, which should definitely appeal to those who love those first 13 episodes the most, which includes Anno himself.
最初の頃のちょっと暗い方が好きだったんですよ。2号ライダーになって明るくなったのも好きは好きなんですけど、アクションが良かったので、でも雰囲気はやっぱ最初の暗い方が僕は好きです。
In the meantime, Kamen Rider has existed just fine on its own. It has a lovable cast in the form of Tachibana's various clubs and the Kamen Rider Kids Corps. It has an effective score and an infectious theme song. It has a soundscape that, whether it be the noises which accompany Rider's attacks and poses, cries of the Shocker minions, or demented kaijin laughs, is an integral character in and of itself. It has plenty of entertainment value, and it has its titular bike-riding heroes who fight for what's right, and does so with all sincerity.
平和と正義、それ以上に人の命は大切なのだ。ご安心なさい。連れ去られた達治君を必ず救い出す。この仮面ライダーが命に変えても。
What at first glance might appear to be nonsensical gibberish slaps pretty hard. There can technically be peace while people unjustly suffer, and justice can be twisted to inflict harm upon the undeserving. However, the focus on protecting human life, especially innocent human life, like children, definitely cuts to the heart of the matter, and is what the other two concepts should be in service of. And this scene isn't an isolated incident. Kamen Rider has its fair share of wisdom and encouragement to impart throughout its run. Besides, divorced from rider kicks and other superhuman abilities, Kamen Rider is the story of men who refuse to be defeated by their misfortunes. They use their setbacks, their curses, for the benefit of others and demonstrate endurance in the face of hardships. That's true for Kamen Rider, who starts as an individual against a seemingly invincible foe. That's true for both the show's leads in real life. One recovered from a rough motorcycle accident to return to the show, and the other lost virtually everything in a fire, but overcame impossible odds to reclaim his life. And as mentioned before, is true for the filmmakers. Talented people who use a borderline non-existent budget to make an interesting show and lay the foundation for one of the biggest names in Japanese pop culture. And evidently, its spirit is not bound by dated effects and flimsy scripting. It extends beyond the realm of fiction, from Kamen Rider's continued appeal to children, to the statue that survived untouched by the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. To elaborate on the latter for a moment, the city of Ishinomaki was absolutely ravaged by the aforementioned earthquake and tsunami, suffering the highest death toll and extensive damage. Yet, this statue of the original Rider remained standing tall to become a symbol of hope for Ishinomaki's people in the long hard days after the storm. These inspiring characteristics, married to the show's sense of energy and style, have done much to make Kamen Rider worthwhile despite its flaws. It has too much to appreciate to not recommend in some capacity. It was game-changing in its own time, arguably defining tokusatsu for its decade, and continues to fascinate and astound even generations removed from its heyday. And that is why Kamen Rider still works today. And yeah, that's Kamen Rider. There we are, covered the entire original series. What's next? Maybe Kuga, maybe Double, maybe Black. We'll see. In the meantime, thanks for joining me on this journey, and a shout out to my patrons, Monkey Pant, Bron James, and Michael Stevens. I appreciate you all a bunch. And for everyone else, let me know what you think about Kamen Rider in the comment section below. Or share what Kamen Rider show or movie you think should be covered next and why. Though until next time, take care.